right. Let's do something interesting. Went on a cruise. What? Coachella. Oh, that music festival. Anybody else do something interesting? Well, if you didn't do anything interesting, then you're probably really glad to. Our topic for today is Can you hear me now? Okay. Our topic for today is about the second and third generation of survivors of genocide. Surviving, you know, there used to be some controversy about what it meant to be a survivor. There were some people who insisted that the only survivors of the Holocaust were people who had had an accident in a death camp. And as time has passed, we've recognized that one's status as a survivor is much more complicated than that. And it's grown to mean that someone who survived the Holocaust generally is someone whose life was altered seriously by their experiences during the war. And we don't really like to categorize people in terms of the depth of their suffering. We just like to recognize the fact that that cataclysmic event in the Holocaust produced survivors who were also not directly involved. And as we have gotten to know people who are the descendants of the Armenian genocide, we realize the similarities between their experiences and those of the children and grandchildren of survivors. So we are really pleased today that people have offered to come and share what their experience as second and third generation survivors of genocide has meant in their lifetimes. And I'm going to turn the rest of the program over to Barbara McCaffrey, who is our moderator for today and who will introduce the subject for today. So why don't you all welcome Barbara, who's also the president of the Alliance.
Okay, we remember this sound. Before I retire, I am going to do something about this. But I don't think it's going to be this week. I just want to say how pleased I am that this panel is happening, particularly happening in the context of a week in which many communities across the United States are commemorating the Holocaust and remembering survivors. And I had the great honor of attending an event on Sunday afternoon put on by the Jewish community in Sonoma County, which was primarily for survivors and focused on transmitting the legacy to the next generation. And another commemoration last night at one of our local colleges, which focuses on an understanding of the Holocaust in the context of other genocides. And again, the focus is on transmitting and engaging the young people in the community. And today feels like an extension of that particular focus. As a context, what I thought I might do is just share a little bit with you about the commemoration called Yom HaShoah. And today is actually the day designated, but as is the case with almost everything Jewish, we like extending things. A week, you know, here or there a couple of days. So there are many commemorations going on throughout the country. And the statement prepared by the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. about the Days of Remembrance and their particular focus for this year. And they begin with an epigraph from Elie Wiesel. I know a lot of you have read his work called Night. How many of you have read Night? Significant number. Wiesel says, there may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest. The United States Congress established the Days of Remembrance as our nation's annual commemoration of the Holocaust and created the United Holocaust Memorial Museum as a permanent living memorial to the victims. This year, Holocaust Remembrance Day is Tuesday, April 21st. The museum has designated Never Again, What You Do Matters as the theme for this year's observance. And I know that just taking this lecture series matters enormously because you're educating yourselves. Few stories illustrate more powerfully the difference an individual can make in creating a more just and humane world than that of Raphael Lemkin. And I know there has been mention of Lemkin in your text, but you may not have studied him in great detail. This year marks 50 years since his death, and he was a Polish-Jewish lawyer who watched from the shores of the United States as the Nazis persecuted and murdered members of his family, along with millions of other Jews, solely on the basis of their identity. Winston Churchill described this mass murder as a crime without a name. Lemkin was a prominent attorney and an expert in national law, working in Warsaw, in Poland, and in Germany. Working in Warsaw when Germany was invaded. Germany invaded Poland in September of 1939. He answered his country's call for able-bodied men to go eastward in the hopes of forming a new defensive line against Germany. But all hope collapsed when the Soviet Union suddenly occupied eastern Poland. Lemkin escaped to Sweden by way of Lithuania. You might remember that math quiz you had early in the semester. There he completed arrangements to immigrate to the United States. He began work at Duke University in North Carolina in April of 1941, shortly before the United States entered World War II. In 1944, Lemkin became increasingly alarmed at the extent of the destruction of European Jewish communities, and he was determined to name the crime that had killed his family. He coined the term genocide as a first step in his relentless personal drive to help prevent its repetition. Lemkin next conceived the Genocide Convention and wrote its first draft. In the shadow of the Holocaust, in no small part due to his tireless efforts, the United Nations approved the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in 1948. Lemkin did not celebrate, but called it an epitaph on his mother's grave. He continued his efforts to prevent genocide until his death of a heart attack in 1959. Many others took up his passion and commitment to prevent genocide. One notable example was the late U.S. Senator from Wisconsin, William Proxmire. Starting in 1967, Senator Proxmire waged a single-handed campaign to get the Genocide Convention certified and ratified by the United States Senate. For 19 years, Proxmire made a speech every day that Congress were the same, until the Senate ratified the convention in 1986. The Holocaust demonstrates one of the greatest lessons about individual responsibility, that each of us has the choice to act or not to act, and that there are consequences to our decisions. The evidence of this crime of all crimes against humanity demonstrates that the Holocaust was not inevitable. It happened because ordinary people became accomplices to the process of targeting groups of people and eventually to mass murder. A point which I think was well made by Professor Waller when he joined us earlier this semester. Whether through sheer or motivated by career advancement, peer approval, or anti-Semitic prejudice, in the long span between words of hate and the machinery of death at Auschwitz, many had the opportunity to affect the outcome. Neighbors and friends, doctors and judges, businessmen and clergy, educators and policemen, and ultimately even other governments chose not to act. Legions of others, government workers and professionals, enabled and assisted in the implementation of policies and practices targeting Jews and others. Remembrance obligates us not only to memorialize those who were killed, but also to reflect on what could have been done to save them. Those who survived tell us that as many faced their horrific deaths, their last words were, "Remember us, tell our story." Survivors promised that they would, and that never again would the world stand silent or look the other way. That was the promise that drove Lemkin's lifetime of commitment. The Holocaust reminds us of the fragility of democracy and the need for citizens to both be well-informed and vigilant about the preservation of democratic ideals. An engaged citizenry that embraces the power of the individual to make a difference is the frontline defense for strong, just societies. What we do or choose not to do matters. And I ask us today to really listen to these stories, because it is not just the survivors whose lives were affected by the Holocaust, but the generations that came afterward. Many of them, in a way, the custodians of those memories, because the people who survived those genocides are no longer with us, or because they're still with us, but maybe a couple hundred miles away, as Steve's father is. I am very honored to have three panelists today who will be joining us. Christine Davidian will be talking about her grandmother and her aunt's experience in the Armenian genocide. Christine helped found the Armenians of the North Bay, and she's a board member of the Alliance for the Study of the Holocaust. Stephen Schwartz is a child of a survivor, and he'll be telling us some of his father's story. And his father's story also connects with the opening of the archives at Bad Arolsen. And there is some information over here that you may want to look at about that archive. And then lastly, somebody who was willing to step in on very short notice. We're very honored that Rabbi Jack Gabriel is joining us, again, child of survivors. Rabbi Gabriel is the religious leader of the congregation in Sonoma, Congregation Shir Shalom, and we're very honored to have members of his congregation with us today. So I'm going to ask our panelists to join me at the table, and we're going to move this noisy microphone over there. Each of the panelists is going to speak for about 15 minutes about their family story, and then we have a few questions that each of them will answer, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. Would you please join me in welcoming our panelists? Thank you.
I guess they can't turn it off, huh? Uh-oh.
It's a tough act to follow.
Okay. Gonna move it over.
No, let's, here, I'll hold it. You hold the water.
Is that not on?
Okay, here we go.
Oh, that's for recording, eh? Okay.
Close enough?
Yeah,
Right.
perfect.
Uh-oh, I just dropped something down there. Oh,
That's okay.
uh-oh.
We'll, it's fine.
Is there a napkin or something?
High tech.
We'll handle it later. Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Move
first
this
ask
down.
Christine, and I'll get a napkin. While you're talking, we'll
Just
deal with
moving
it.
over, that's all. Here we go. Here's your chair. We need one more chair over.
Okay,
You got it?
How about we move these up
Yeah.
on the stage?
great.
Get the chair out of the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay.
Hold that for Christine.
All right, thank you.
Christine, would you feel? Yeah. Christine, would you feel more comfortable at the podium? Or would you like to just do it
It's after you.
here?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, hope that's not in your way here. Put it underneath, there we go.
Good.
All right. Is that not working?
Yeah. You know, I'll probably stand for part of it. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
that sounds good. Can everybody hear me? Is that okay? All right. First of all, thank you. Oh, no? Louder? Okay, how's that? Thank you for inviting me here today. If this is not worked up. Here. Sorry. Okay. It's not working. Yeah, sounds good to me. Okay, here, everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really glad to be here, as I always am. See your young, happy, bright minds here today. I also am so excited to be here to actually show a picture of my family. I never dreamed in a million years that I'd be sitting here showing a picture of my grandmother, my grandfather, father, and my two aunts. And I'll go over that and who they are in just a minute as I start out to talk a little bit about my family history and how it affected me. I'm a third generation Armenian genocide survivor. I was born in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is the very first Armenian community in the U.S., which in itself has a very large legacy. Both of my grandmothers survived the genocide, and they were both widows. My grandfathers were already here in the U.S. They had already lost their wives, but they had come before the genocide because there were massacres before the genocide in 1915, and there was a large amount of men that left at that time after the Hamidian massacres in the mid-1890s. And they were people that were here, but they left their families behind with the idea they would go back with money and bring their families back with them. But one of my grandfathers, I know for sure, lost about 68 of his relatives. There's not much I know about my maternal grandmother. She didn't talk a lot, but then it was a time where we really didn't ask a lot of questions at the time. But we know that she was married at age 13, she was widowed, and she escaped going to Syria. She remarried my grandfather after meeting him in Marseille. I don't know how she got to Marseille, but she met him there, came to the U.S. with his grown son and daughter-in-law. He actually went to France to pick up his son and daughter-in-law. And she had my mother at age 44. My paternal grandmother escaped by going north into the mountains with her daughter and 5 other family relatives. They were in the middle part of Turkey and had to go up through the mountains to survive. She was also widowed again and remarried my grandfather when she arrived in the U.S. around 1920. Now, nothing has been really documented about my paternal aunt, who is the tall woman over there to the right. She, at around the age of 92, decided that she would finally speak in front of people about what she remembered. At that age, however, there's not a lot that she remembered, but she was very young at the time, so I know there's a lot that she probably can't remember, but she probably did the best. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to show the videotape of her presentation at Newton High School in Newton, Massachusetts. It was a day of remembrance at Newton High School. The quality is not that great because my cousin just held the video the whole time.
Take my mind. So anyways, I thought that was an ugly thing, but there it was. And then, like I said, there were 7 of us, and we had a horse and a wagon of some kind, I don't recall. Don't forget, I was about 4 years old at that time, which means I couldn't remember too much. But there was so much hearsay when friends used to visit that were in the same boat who had survived the massacre. So the family would sit there and talk about, you know, we did this, we did that, we didn't get here or whatever. It went on forever. All that was like seeing a movie over again, you know, to repeat what they did and what they didn't do. So anyways, and then, I'm losing it. Okay. And then we were with a group of soldiers. That is the 7 of us. And the general, the army general, gave my mother a gun to see if she could protect us. So I don't know what she could do, but we had a gun anyways. So that went fine. But it was survival and hardship, no matter where you went or what you wanted to do. But I think we got some foreign aid sometimes, maybe. So churches sometimes were trying to help. My mother and aunt tried to earn money. And when we were in Russia, they made fried bread and sold that and did sewing. And they put us three kids in an orphanage so they could try to work, make a few dollars or something for survival. Everything was survival. Are we going to make it? And then I have to say that we went on freight trains to get away on certain times. I mean, don't ask me where, because we did so much traveling, so much running, just for the sake of survival. So, oh yes, coming to America. How did we get here? They cut my hair off like the army kids get, because fear of having lice in your hair. Because if you have lice in your hair, US won't take you in. So my mother shaved my head, and I have a picture here to show everybody thinks I'm a boy, which is okay. Later on. So anyways, so how did we get here? After 2 weeks on the ship of President Wilson in 1920, we came to America. Now, I'd like you to ask me how we got here, because that's a big question. I had an uncle here who had come previously. He had a daughter who had a car accident. So he promised himself, if the daughter survives the accident, he's going to bring us over. If she died, forget it. So, obviously, she survived. And that's how we got here. So, we came to Ellis. After 2 weeks on the ship, President Wilson ship, after 2 weeks, we came to Ellis Island, and then my uncle came and took us to his house, and he had 3 children, and imagine people coming in on top of that. By the way, my 7 people were my grandmother, uncle, aunt, my mother, my 2 cousins, and I. So all of us made that trip. Believe it or not, we made it. So that's how it was. Thank goodness the daughter survived. We could have been nowhere. So that's about it. I can't say much.
Okay, you can cut it, yeah. There was one scene that I don't think I captured, but there was a point at which, when the 7 were going north, they saw mothers throwing their babies in the river. And they were doing that to keep them from being taken over by the Turks, having their whole lives erased, or to actually save their lives. I mean, to make their lives, I mean, I am not even saying this correctly, so that they wouldn't have to endure a horrible life, basically. My grandmother said that she thought about it, throwing my aunt into the river, and she said she'd do it. So I know she's very thankful today that she had made that decision, but, you know, if you notice a couple of things that she said, that she mentioned it was the massacre. You see, back at that stage, it was not coined a genocide. So even people her generation, the survivors, still considered a massacre because they did not understand the relevance of the Armenian genocide. To have a gun was also very significant. It was General Antranik that gave my grandmother the gun, which was really amazing. Anybody who had a wagon and a gun really doing quite well. So they really were able to survive for those particular reasons. The other thing that she also mentioned is when they came to America, they were widows and they were trying to match up men and women together because they wanted to get on with their lives. And apparently there was a man that asked my grandmother to marry her, and she said, "I have nothing against you, but I can't marry you because I don't know if your wife is dead or not." So my aunt married her. The aunt married her instead, which I can't understand. But another man came to her and said, "I'd like to marry you." And she said, "Well, I know your wife is dead, so I'll marry you." And that's my grandfather in the picture right here. So it's hard to believe that those are the kind of basic decisions that they had to make when they first came here. It was a really struggle to survive, and that's what it was all about. It was all about survival. The other thing that I wanted to just mention that was sort of affected me was all of these remarriages. There were large generation gaps in our family that sort of made us disjointed. I had large age differences between aunts and uncles and first cousins who were actually my mother's age. So that was sort of strange. My friends didn't have families like that. It was very odd. The language barrier was tough. My grandmothers didn't speak English, and all the survivors spoke Armenian. But the second generation was embarrassed to speak Armenian. So even though it was my first language, once we went into nuclear families, I lost my Armenian, started using my English, but it bothered my grandparents, and this language issue that was happening in the house, which was difficult. But I suppose at that time you can't blame the second generation because at that time there was no sympathy for immigrant families who didn't speak English. There were no special programs to teach anybody English at the time. In terms of genocide, I learned genocide at an early age because I overheard the atrocities being discussed with the survivors. They told things like they ate grass to survive. They talked about how Turkish neighbors saved them, even Kurds helped and saved them, how they walked, and most impressionably for me, as my grandmother used to always say, nothing is sweeter than water. And amazingly, they built churches and they believed in God. They spent their lives focusing on surviving. And remember, they had to go through the Depression and World War II on top of that, so life was pretty tough. They didn't spend their time documenting or anything. Nobody knew to do anything like that. I was brought up with a family that was associated with the Revolutionary Federation. Okay. I grew up with being sort of sheltered with my Armenian world. I grew up with a revolutionary family. We wanted to free Armenia at the time. We weren't focused on genocide, but we wanted to free Armenia because there was no country left. At the same time, I was, grew up in an Irish Catholic neighborhood, and nobody really related to what my background was, so I felt like I had two different worlds. I couldn't cross both worlds. It was too hard. It was too difficult to do that and make sense of both worlds at the same time. I want to go to Armenia with a gun and free Armenia, and then I'm hurt because I can't join the Girl Scouts. It was very strange. So it really affected me in terms of, how do I live my life? I hear grandparents talking about their survival, and we go to school and we learn nothing about the past. That's it.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, it's good to be here. Again, my name is Steve Schwartz. I'm looking forward to telling you some more about my family's history and what it meant for me growing up and today. I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit about the three closest relatives that were affected by the Holocaust. My grandfather, his name's Daniel, they call him Deju. He fought for the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and he grew up in a border area where Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and the Ukraine meet. And he was drafted into the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Fast forward about 20 years later, he's in line at Auschwitz at the selection for Mengele, and he's trying to go to the gas chambers. He's trying to go to a line where people live. And he shows that his finger, where it got shot off as a soldier for the Austro-Hungarian Empire, i.e. the Nazis ally in World War I, or the Germans ally in World War I. He thought that might get a bit of sympathy. But they looked at that and said, oh, well, you're weak, you can't work, so you're going to the gas chamber. So this is his story. Part of the irony of it is he actually came to the United States as a young boy. He came with his twin brother before World War I. Right? And he just chose to go back to what he thought would be a better life in Eastern Europe, then drafted, then murdered. But he did, one message there, you could say he had some humanity, that individuals could make the decision and choose the right thing right to the end. Turned out to be misplaced. My grandmother, Malvina is her name, she lived her whole life within a 20-mile radius. She was known for being a good cook and a great housewife. She did a lot of gardening, a lot of friends, but not just Jewish friends. The village that my dad grew up in and my grandmother grew up in, it was probably less than 5% Jewish. It wasn't what some of you might have heard of as a shtetl or a ghetto. They were one of a few Jewish families in the area. She was murdered in the gas chambers at Auschwitz to labeled a political prisoner. Really never had any political interests in her life. My dad, until about age 13, he had a pretty nice life living in a rural area in Czechoslovakia. Right? At age 2, he was getting on a wagon with his dad going to town to sell vegetables at farmers markets to all kinds of customers, but also to some of the Jewish people in the nearby town would buy things like horseradish and foods that were tied into different holidays that Jews were celebrating. My grandparents had a little inn, and they had a small farm, about 3 acres essentially. Things got worse as World War II moved on, where he was in the hinterlands, right? So far away from the direct impact of Kristallnacht and some of the things you've heard about in Germany. So it was really in 1943 when things were really hitting hard for his family. They were taken to a ghetto in the town of Barracksaz, which is nearby, where he had gone to junior high. And in that ghetto, the first few days, it was interesting because my grandfather had a little bit of more freedom than the average person in that ghetto. He was able to come and go for those first few days. And when I heard this, I said, well, why didn't you run? I mean, why didn't he run? Why didn't he leave and pitch? He said, well, my dad. Well, first, he didn't know where to go. Second, he didn't know how bad things were around. It wasn't like you could just get on the internet and see what was happening. And third, what are you going to do? Leave your 13-year-old son and your 23-year-old daughter and your wife? So he stayed with the family. A few days later, they were locked into that ghetto and put on a train to Auschwitz. On the way there, in the line going to the selection of really life or death in Auschwitz, someone coached my dad, said, tell them you're 16. Tell them you have a profession. He said, I'm going to tell them I'm an electrician. And that'll show them that you have value, right? So kids didn't make it. I heard a number last night, about 7% of the kids survived. And he's very young for a survivor. Part of it is because they didn't know how young he was. He worked hard to stay alive, but he survived due to his wits, his luck, and assistance from other folks. It turns out, and this is something that I think referenced, but about 2 years ago, my dad was on 60 Minutes, it's the CBS program, and it was part of a group of 3 survivors they brought back to this archive called Bad Arolsen. And one thing, these were records, really millions and millions of documents of what happened in the Holocaust. This was managed by the International Commission for the Red Cross, and it wasn't made public until 60 years after the Holocaust was over, so about 3 years ago. And one of the they found there was transportation records for my father. He was scheduled to go on a transport from Buchenwald concentration camp to an underground armaments factory, a place where they were making bombs, and they'd get little kids because they had smaller fingers to wire these bombs. The life expectancy in Dora, in this armaments factory, was about 3 weeks. Right? It's cold, wet, hard conditions, lack of food. People didn't survive there. What we found out just a couple of years ago, someone fabricated the records within the concentration camp so that my dad could be stuck in the infirmary, the hospital at the camp during that time. His name was crossed off a list to go to this transport to the other place, and he was able to stay in Buchenwald. You're not lucky to be able to stay in Buchenwald, but in that case, it was better than going to Dora. In Buchenwald, there were others that looked out for him as a 13-year-old. A couple of different stories, but I'll just say one thing. He's a great chess player. I don't know if any of you play chess, but I would bet on my dad. Part of why he's a great chess player is because a Czech master taught him to play chess in Buchenwald. Part of why he's a great chess player is because when you won a game in Buchenwald, they'd give you some extra soup or some extra bread. So he was, part of why he survived was he was able to win some of these games. It's ironic. One of the great things towards the end of the year he was in Buchenwald, towards the end of before he was going to be liberated, some of the underground folks, they said, we're going to get you to sneak into this office where the Nazis were during bombing raids. There were disarray in the camp. So go steal some insignia. So he stole 17 insignia. You know, all the Jews were wearing gold, yellow stars. They put on a different star. About a couple days later, there was a lineup to send kids off on a death march, and he stood at the front of the line and I said, you know, are you Jewish? And he knew a little German, and he cussed them out, said, you know, what are you saying? I'm not a Jew, I'm da-da. And the rest of the kids in line rarely say the same thing, and it saved their lives. Well, the Holocaust turned my dad into an orphan and a smuggler. After the concentration camp, one of the things that he was doing, just trying to survive as a 14-year-old kid, was making a few bucks. He was riding trains from one country to another. He'd sell cigarettes there and buy some matches or something else there, bring it back, riding on top of trains, different kinds of things. And it clearly affects him in certain ways to this day. So that's a little bit about my grandma, my grandfather, and my father. I'm going to say a little bit about individuals that made a difference here. You know, there's a lot of focus on Adolf Hitler, and I feel like that's missing out on the reach of all the different people that were involved in making the Holocaust happen. The people that pulled my grandparents from their land, and my father and my aunt were Hungarians. They were Hungarians that were part of this machinery of death. Mengele is a name you may know. He was the one who selected my grandparents to go to the gas chamber and selected my father to go to Buchenwald, which allowed him to survive. There were villagers who stole my family's cow and other belongings, and when he came back after the concentration camp, he said, my grandfather said, no matter what happens, everyone come back after this mess. My dad came back. He was kind of a tagger. Every train station he passed, he tagged, you know, Mickey, his name Mickey Schwartz. Mickey's alive, I'm going home. And so if his aunt, his sister, or his mom or dad saw that, they would know that he was on the way back. He went back, and there were one neighbor helped him figure out who stole all the other things from the family's house while they were gone. Individuals can be on both sides of this. And then on the individual side, I'll also say that Allies, the U.S. troops that liberated my father, he's still very grateful to them to this day. And I've got some notes that are a little disorganized here. Other individuals, I want to think of a non-Jewish Czech person who offered to adopt my father when he was right after the concentration camp. He was a skinny guy, it's clear he was a survivor. This guy said, come live with me, you can be in my house, I'll get you to school. My dad said, no, I have to go home and try to see if my family's still alive. But that kind of human feeling was still out there, Jews, non-Jews, looking out for each other. All right, so they asked us to talk, one of the questions we were going to talk about a little bit is a legacy. 5 minutes. For me, I became a campus leader for Amnesty International, which is a human rights group, when I was in college. I didn't really make a connection to the fact that my dad was a Holocaust survivor. I think maybe until a couple of years later. But I was working for human rights for different people of all different groups, and that's part of the legacy here. I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I made connections between the choices I made and my family's past, hearing about my parents growing up and my dad growing up on a farm. I got interested in agriculture. Today I run a nonprofit group in Sebastopol that helps beginning farmers get access to land and financing. I work with a lot of immigrant farmers. Land reform, I've been doing this almost 10 years now, but I think it's just the last year, so I've kind of put it together that, my family was farm. They were stripped from the land that they owned, and now I'm trying to help other people get access to land. It was 2 years ago, it was the first time that I came out as a Holocaust survivor, second generation, talking to people I didn't know about this topic. And it's an awkward thing. I think it's something, had been a private thing, and when the CBS article happened, my family was in the newspaper and Press Democrat and elsewhere. And it was strange, like seeing some friends, and New Year's party just after that, no one knew what to say, and I really didn't want to talk about it. I mean, the last thing I'd want to do at a New Year's party is talk about the Holocaust, but there is a legacy. I mean, some of the specific things I'd say is, in our house, you did not waste food. Like, I don't know, you've all been to cafeteria here or wherever, but in our house, there was never a bite of food left on someone's plate. And that's something that sticks with me. And I remember once as a kid, we had a food fight, and we got in big trouble. If you did not waste food, it's an honor to expect them. I mean, my dad lived, if you got a piece of carrot in your soup once during the week, it was a big thing. And stale bread was the normal thing. So we can go over some of these other things as we go on. Lessons, what else did you hope we talked about in this section?
At what age did you find out about this?
I think by the time I was at 11 or 12, I knew that my dad was a Holocaust survivor. But I think it first became more, some of the meaning for this, the symbolic meaning, came to me when I'm Jewish, as you probably figured, but at my bar mitzvah, we had my bar mitzvah in Israel. It was the first time I'd seen, first time my dad had seen his sister in 27 years. And she had sent my brother a gold ring for his bar mitzvah with his initials, Dan Schwartz. And she gave me a gold ring that said SDS. And I thought, oh, she likes me better. She put that middle initial in there. And I talked to them, well, no, my initials are SS, right? So this is the most evil symbol of the most evil piece of the Nazi regime. And there's no way she was going to let a symbol like that be on a ring that she gives to me. So I don't use an SS anymore. I always put that D in. But symbolically at 13, it started to stick with me. Hey, we want to remember symbolically that what was done to our family. As a college student, I started asking more questions of my dad. He started telling me more. I don't know if he felt like I was ready to hear it or if he felt like he was ready to talk about it. But it's probably a little mixture of the two. And so that consciousness is something that I've got a 5-year-old daughter now and a 3-year-old, and I don't plan to be talking to him about any of this stuff for a long time. But that's some story. I'm looking forward to hearing some additional questions from y'all later on.
So you know what, Barbara? When I do this, I'd like you to sit over here so I could actually reach for my stuff. Okay? Okay, so who likes to listen to stuff like this for an hour? Raise your hand. Who hates listening to stuff like this for an hour? Who's afraid to raise their hand? Yeah, thank you. Okay, please stand up. Okay, so just stretch a little bit, because it's hard to listen to anything for now, much less suffering. Just stretch. Okay, just stretch. All right. Say about 10 words to your friend.
10 words. Sit and say 10 words.
Yeah,
too.
10 words. I felt so disjointed today. I don't know why.
Well, I think you've got good stuff across it. It's hard. Thank you.
I know. Yeah.
Good. Anybody feel any better? Raise your hand. Okay, who feels worse? Who's afraid to raise their hand for any reason? Thank you. All right, my name is Rabbi Jack Gabriel, and I was born in Italy. I was born in Italy not because my parents were on vacation there. Italy's a pretty place. I was born in a very pretty part of Italy called Santa Maria delle Alta Provincia di Lecce. I think that the name is larger than the town. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I think 4 people live there. So, first of all, I want to say at the very beginning that I'm honored to be here. I didn't know who'd be here. Mostly adults. And I have a few caveats to say at the very beginning. First of all, if I break down and cry, that's part of my story. And if I'm cynical or funny, that's part of my story. And if I sound angry or confused, that's part of my story. Okay? The next thing I want to do is I'm going to do a few things rather than talk. Well, talk as I do the things. So the way Jews and maybe many other people, maybe Catholics too, memorialize the dead is with a candle. I have 50 candles here. These are tea light candles, in case you're having tea and you need a light. But you can also use these as memorial candles. Not Jewish memorial candles because they have to last at least a day, like 24 hours, 25 hours. But these are candles, and in a pinch, I would use them for a memorial candle, even as a rabbi. Now, does this work? Someone gave me a little electric one for memorial. It doesn't seem to work. This is what I refer to as a tchotchke. Anybody know that word, tchotchke? It's like a little thing. It's like a nothing. It's like a little nothing. But it's supposed to be a memorial candle.
Let me try it.
Can you make it work? Thank you. Anyway, that's a memorial candle. And today is Yom HaShoah, and I was going to try to use a little tchotchke because I didn't want to light, I didn't know if we'd get doused with water if I lit a real candle here, you know. I don't know how totally safe, you know, State University is in terms of electricity or lights or fire, you know, so. But I'd be lighting that candle because, so put that on those over there. So that's my memorial candle for 1.5 million children. Talk about 6 million. In the Holocaust, they don't mention it's 1.5 million children. There's a place in Israel where you walk through it, and it's very cool. You walk through it, and there's like lights shining off mirrors. And there's a very quiet drone of names. Every couple of seconds, there's a name. And they keep doing it until they do 1.5 million children's names. And then they start again. So it takes, I don't know, a couple of years to do the cycle. Anyway, this is for 1.5 million children. And it's also for my grandfather, Ben Zion, and for my grandmother, Fruma, and for my grandmother, Sarah, and also for my mother, Matilda, who died about a year and a half ago, and for my father, David, who died 20 years ago this year. And my mother and father were from Poland. My grandparents were from Poland. I never met my grandparents. My mother and father were sweethearts growing up. Oh, let me answer another question. When did I hear about, at what age was I told about the Holocaust? I was told about it in the womb. I was told about it through my mother's chemicals, my mother's adrenaline, my mother's fear responses, my mother's fear of life. So I knew about it in the womb. Anyway, my mother and father were sweethearts in Poland. Now my father was a big, handsome guy, very beautiful, athletic, great swimmer, great soccer player. My mother was very beautiful too. I wish I had their picture with me. And around 1941, my father had to go into hiding because he was this big strapping guy, and he would be taken immediately to a work camp. So he went into hiding, but he was caught anyway. And 2 stories about my father. One is like this. He's captured by Polish accomplices with the Nazis. He's taken to a camp. No, he's taken to a town, station, I don't know what town it is. These stories were never told to me, I just had to overhear them. If I ever asked my parents directly about the Holocaust, they would yell at me and say, you don't have to know this. Why are you asking these questions? So I would overhear these answers, so it's a little confused. But some town, some little Polish stupid town. And they had a train station there. And the train was filling up for a lovely, lovely vacation in Auschwitz. A vacation that people were dying to go there. So the train was really full. And my father was being held while, listen to this wonderful moment in history. The moron SS guy and the train guy are talking to each other saying, we have to put this Jew on. And the moron says to the moron, there's no room on the train. So the moron says to the moron, let's make room. We have to put him on. And so the other morons so that the morons are talking to each other. My father looks at the 2 morons and he runs away, escapes out the back. 2 morons. 2 murderous morons. Another story. My father's captured again. He's taken to a place called Glambutchik, which means hole. It's not one of the fancy names like Birkenau, Belsen, Theresienstadt, Auschwitz, not Sobibor. It's not one of the fancy places. It's called Butchik, the hole. It's an old quarry in some pardon me, some fucking place in Poland. And he's lined up with 600 people, lined up in rows. And the first 20 are in the front, and people line up across from them and shoot the first row of people, and they fall into the hole. The next group lines up, and they're killed, and they fall into the hole. And then the next group are killed, and they fall into the hole. Oh, by the way, after a certain number of deaths, they pour a little lime on top of it. The bodies will smell so bad, or whatever they use lime for. And then finally, my father's row comes up. It wasn't necessarily the last row, but one father rows come up, and they shoot everybody, and somehow, if you could explain this to me, I'll make you the rabbi, okay? Somehow my father's not hit. But he notices, and he's smart enough to say, ooh, I'm falling into this hole. So he falls into the hole, and then another row is shot, and more people fall, and they fall on top of him. Another row falls, and they all fall on top of him. And at the end, they kill the 600. And then the monsters go away with their... And then my father, being a strong man, I told you before, handsome, very strong, crawls out from under the dead bodies. Do you know what it takes to crawl through dead bodies for who knows how many feet? I have no idea. My father crawls through that, gets out. So that's two little stories about my daddy. My mommy's story is like this. How much time do we have?
8 minutes.
8 minutes. Boy, first thing I need to say before I tell my mommy's story, I cannot possibly tell the story of the Holocaust. I'm sorry if you thought I was going to tell you about the Holocaust. I did bring a lot of cards, personal cards. If you want to ask me about the Holocaust and you want to take a little more time, I'm a little embarrassed to try to tell you the story of the Holocaust in 15 minutes. I think it's a little CNN. Okay, so I can't tell you about the Holocaust. I'm telling you stories about my family. So, but I have cards for you. And I'm usually not this intense. I'm actually fairly funny 98% of the time. Is that true, Pamela? Yeah. But this happens to be one of the topics I get a little buzzed about. Mommy's story. She's in the attic with my father's mother, her own father and mother, 4 other people. And the reason they're in the attic is because Nazis are hunting for Jews, like they're hunting for, I don't know, weasels or rats or whatever the hell. They're hunting for us. These useless pieces of crap. And lucky parents had these lovely Catholic friends who, at the risk of their own lives and their children's lives, hid them in their attic. Can you imagine hiding someone who's not even your family for 18 months in an attic and feeding them every day, 7, 8 people? So, my parents, my father's out escaping through bodies, but my mother's in this attic, and the person who's the leader of the group says we can't stay here any longer because the Nazis are getting closer. Every day they seem to know that they can sniff Jews. I don't know what the story is, but he says we have to go to another place. And so my mother's hip to that. This guy's a very intelligent leader. He's a young man. He's very, very, very qualified. And he says, we're moving to another home. And my mother's father and mother and my father's mother, okay, because they're sort of fiancés, say, we can't go, we're old people. We're moving down the street. So my mother begs them, come with us. Says, no, we'll stay here. The woman downstairs will feed us. It'll be easier. There's only 3 of us. Don't worry. You'll come in a few days. You'll go find us. So my mother goes off with this man and stays there and comes back in a few days, and guess what she finds? Before she even gets to the house, she finds Fluma, Sarah, and Ben Sion shot to death in the street and left there. Her mother and father and her boyfriend's father shot to death in the street. I don't know if they're still bleeding, probably not after a few days. So she has to bury them. She's 18 years old. So that's my mother's little story. So I'm a product of that story. I came to America when I was 3 1/2, forgot Italian, learned English. And how much time do we have now?
The time you have.
Okay, thank you. So, how has this affected me? Not. So I brought some props. One thing is I brought music paper because I became a musician. I started writing songs around 14, 15. When I was 18, I sold my first song to April Music. When I was 23, I got a recording contract with Columbia Records. When I was 33, I won a Grammy in Canada as a producer of a record. I got pretty musical. Actually, this way. I signed with Columbia the same week as Bruce Springsteen. I was born to run, just like Bruce. What I have left over from my mother is, this is one of my father's shirts. All I have really is, when a person dies in Judaism, when you hear about the death or see the death, you tear your shirt in very traditional homes, and you never repair it. Most people just throw away the shirt afterwards, but this is when my mother died, I saved it. This is my father's shirt, which I actually fit into now. For my father, I got this ring, which has a menorah on it that I think he once upon a time. And I have this T-shirt. I have a couple others, but they have so many holes in them, you know. But I wear it when I want to feel lucky. I wear one of my father's T-shirts. That's about all I got from my father. I have a ring, a couple of T-shirts, maybe a shirt or two. Anybody here have a grandparent who's passed away? Does anybody have possessions from that grandparent? Is it more than a T-shirt, a ring, and a couple of shirts? Right, so this is all I have from my father. He had less from his parents, actually. So, what else? One of the questions. So how's this affected me? Well, it's made me very sensitive to other people's suffering. In 1986, I went to Ethiopia. I went there to help save Ethiopian Jews during a horrible famine. I wound up helping as many non-Ethiopian Jews as Ethiopians. I brought money and food. I put my life in danger. I was scared the entire time I was in Ethiopia. But I gave away a lot of money, I gave away a lot of medicine. I was like Santa Claus. And it felt nice being Santa Claus in Ethiopia in 1986. How else is it affected? I became a rabbi after rock and roll. Natural progression, of course. Again, I can't really tell you about the Holocaust. I can give you a snippet, but I'm just giving you a taste. And again, I'm really grateful that you're here. I think you got a lot of what I said. Thank you.
And I want to apologize. There's no way we have enough time to tell the full stories that we would want to, and also have time for some dialogue. And I know that we've tried very hard this year to not try to have panels of survivors. We brought them and had them share with you for the full time. But today is a slightly different conversation. And what we were trying to do is look at the resonances between the lives of children of survivors and grandchildren of survivors. We actually invited another panelist to join us this year who was not able to, whose great-grandparents were survivors of the Native American genocide. And I'm hoping that when we do this panel, and hopefully we'll continue it in future years, that she will be able to join us as well. Some of the questions we wanted to look at today were, how does the relationship affect your relation with your community as an adult? In other words, and I think you've all started that conversation, and I'd like the next part of it to be much more interactive, and I think all of us have some voice projection.
And we don't have to go back and forth. But I think when you're telling your story, being able to stay at that mic was helpful, but maybe we can wing it from here. And whoever wants to start on that question, it's not like I'm springing this on the panel. We sent them the questions. Your questions, they don't know, but my questions, they know. Christine, do you want to get started?
Okay. I've always felt I've been outraged by injustice from a young age. And so a lot of my being and who I was trying to focus on that and help in certain areas. But as I was maturing and trying to be as an adult, I realized that there was sort of an overwhelming irrelevance of being Armenian, an unimportance. And it was more and more difficult to fight for that kind of recognition. People weren't interested. People didn't learn it, you know. So I sort of, after a while, shunned it. You know, I was supposed to marry an Armenian. I didn't. I married a non-Armenian, and I just made my way right into that, you know, melting my way right into that pot where I should be. But then I became a mother, and then 9/11 hit, and then all those injustices came flowing back up, saying, I've got to do something with that. And lo and behold, I'm very much connected with everybody here and the Alliance, and I've sort of made my way with getting the Armenians together and working on getting that kind of recognition and not feeling as unimportant or irrelevant. And it's also more acceptable. It didn't used to be acceptable.
There's a community.
Yeah, there's a community. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I think relating to oppressed people, trying to really have your heart feel connected to other folks is part of this. And we saw, I think we both saw a woman from Rwanda speak last night, and she was saying the same thing. There's this kind of silent connection you can understand. I know for me, when I think about at a deep level, I think when you're a survivor of the Holocaust, some of this passes down, there's a little psychological mistrust. There's certain things where you say, well, you got to do it by yourself, you know, and who can trust? And I'm trying to tune into that a little bit and make sure that doesn't slow me down much. But my basic the way I live my life is that it's about relationships depending on the community and a broader community. I joined a congregation in Sacramento in 1994, and not long after, the skinhead firebombed the place. He then burnt down the Japanese American Citizens League office, and then firebombed the NAACP office, and then had a plot to try to kill a Chinese American city council member and others. Those 5 communities, the Chinese American, Japanese American, the African American, Jewish community, got together from that and did a lot of positive things, job fairs, working together to help make sure that guy went he did, and other things. I think a bigger theme I have is that there's times when if you define your community narrowly, that community is not enough to help you get through certain challenges, and that's what, you know, Bosnians saw in genocide there. That's what Jews saw. You know, it was Americans that liberated my family, and it was Russians that liberated other families. And today, what's happening in Darfur, they can't solve that domestically. We have to see what we pressure on.
Yeah, well, I think for me, what's happened is I spent a lot of my time entertaining people, and not usually angrily. So what happened was since I was about 8 years old, I realized my parents were 180 degrees away from where I wanted to be. My parents were really, they were sad and depressed and really angry, and they didn't trust anybody. Can't imagine why. But they didn't trust anybody. So about around 8 years old, I decided, you know, they would say weird things to me. I hope they forgive me for saying this. I'm using this for education. They would say to me, I grew up in the Bronx. Anybody know the Bronx? Beautiful South Bronx? Yeah. When I was there, it was actually pretty. But they would say to me things like, all right, forgive me, parents. They would say to me, don't go outside and play ball. The black people will kill you. I always thought that was interesting because my parents didn't know any black people. And they came from Poland. They just picked up the wonderful American prejudices of the 1950s. They just sort of spasmodically from newspapers or wherever you get that stuff, from their friends, who knows. But I decided when I was 8 years old, hey, I loved Willie Mays. Played for the New York Giants, and I wasn't that afraid of black people. I used to play stickball with kids in the street. They didn't seem to want to kill me. They wanted to play stickball with me as far as I could tell. So around 8 years old, I decided that I had to be their parent because they had no clue about America. So I think I've gone from there to play music. Rock and roll was originally a music for me of, first it was folk music, Bob Dylan. I could do a pretty good, how many roads, Mr. Man? I did that real well for a while. And then I got into one love, one heart, let's get together and feel all right. And I went down to Jamaica twice trying to become a Rasta. I was pretty good. I had hair out to here, you know. Ain't got it now, but had it then. So part of it was about trying to do the music of revolution, of survival, of fighting oppression, what Stephen said before, about getting involved in causes. In 1967, I helped take over the the administration building at City College of New York. I didn't go to Vietnam. It's a long story. But I didn't go to Vietnam. I wasn't going to go. One way or the other, I wasn't going to go. But I didn't go to Vietnam. So I was against a lot of the stuff that was to be against growing up. And then a lot of things that I think needed to be for, like the famine in Ethiopia I mentioned. So I think Khalil Gibran talks about, anybody hear of Khalil Gibran? Yeah, poet, talks about suffering hollows you out. So I think I was hollowed out a lot, and so I became aware of both my own suffering and other people's suffering. And so by doing that, I was able to hopefully help others and actually have a pretty happy life.
The last question we formally wanted to cover, and then we'll open it to your questions, was to talk a little bit about why it might be important for us to continue to educate people about what happened in Armenia to the Native Americans during the Holocaust in Cambodia, Darfur, Rwanda. Why is this kind of education important? Why don't you start?
Well, I'm interested in politics. I've worked for a couple of politicians. I think part of why it's important to be aware of this stuff is because governments can really make a difference. When genocide's going down in Bosnia or Darfur, or actually with the German Holocaust of the Jews, it's governments, external governments, that can come to the rescue of the people who need it. And that, in a country like this, if you're tuning in, if things are going down and you're paying attention and you're talking to your representatives, that's part of how we solve it. So I mean, that's part of why the education is important. Also, just individuals can make a difference. You can help the person on your street who's getting whatever, attacked, or maybe whatever it needs to happen to help stand up for justice, whether it's a gay person or an Arab that now is losing rights due to controls that came down after 9/11. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, maybe I should talk. I'm not sure if it's a good thing to teach the stuff. How's that for a rabbi remark? Tell you why. There's so much violence in our society that's constantly aimed at kids. Terminator 48. You know what I mean? All these movies are so desensitizing that if I tell you stuff, I was pretty dramatic because I just was giving you from the heart. But if somebody stands up here and tells you that their mother, had to bury their grandmother, I don't know, man. You see worse in movies. So I don't know if I'm actually imparting to you stuff. And so I'm a little unsure if I'm adding to a desensitization that's already there. But guess what? I hope I'm getting through that not even American, but world, global media stuff It's like, you know, it's like this fantasy stuff. My son gets glued to his computer, you know, he plays those video games. If I let him, he'd play, you know, Grand Theft Auto. He's like 12, you know, he'd play these most, you know, these games where people have their heads blown off consistently. So it's a tough thing. It's a tough world we live in because for whatever reason, there's a little sensitization. And then you read the papers and you see how much is going on today, you know? Who knows about Sri Lanka and the Tamils? All right. Who knows about Darfur? Who knows about Pol Pot, the Khmer Rouge, and Cambodia? I mean, who knows about Tutsis and Hutus? I mean, look, man, this is happening continuously. So do I need to tell you my story? It's on the pages of today's stupid newspaper. Actually, newspapers are dying. It's online for free. You know, any kind of violence you like. So it's very tough for me to decide. But I hope there's still the possibility of person-to-person communication, in which case a personal story, even though it's particular, it's like my story. I can't talk for everybody who was in the Holocaust, but my story maybe will get through this fog of media fantasy, and I think that's worth trying to do. But I'm not sure, so you'll have to tell me if you think it's worthwhile. I can just stand up here and spout, and you tell me if we made an impression.
Anything you want to add, Chris?
Yeah, I think it's a good shoe in here because I think about that a lot.
Yes.
I think about, you know, we can live our lives every single day, enjoy them, and why not? There's nothing wrong with enjoying yourself or playing your music and be happy. You know, it's fine. I love baseball. I love singing. I could do it all day long. But there's a point where we know that life is not better for other people elsewhere. They're just not. I think by telling our stories and communicating it here, I think it will help to give us the people that we need, that have the moral fortitude to say, I understand this past suffering, I understand the suffering now, and hopefully that you'll have the moral fortitude to prevent it in the future. I think these stories are really important. I personally listened to both of your stories. You know so much more about your families than I've ever had because it was never documented. Even to say to you, if it ever happens again, or you know it's happening right now, find a way to document it so that it can continue to be communicated. I just leave with a sense of, you know, wanting to have known more and understood more. I mean, I don't know anything about beyond my grandparents, nothing. There's nothing left. I can't go to Germany, find documents. I mean, I can't go to Turkey, find documents like you do in Germany. There's nothing there. And I guarantee you, big events that happened in Turkey or even Germany do not compare to Grand Theft Auto. Right. It's not real. And there's a difference. To see real suffering requires more moral fortitude. So
I don't know that I can add much to that, but I want to make an analogy before we open it up to questions, because I really love your memorial candle. And a lot of the literature about children of survivors talks about children as being memorial candles, that they're the ones carrying the flame of remembrance. And it also talks about children, and I think the same is true of grandchildren and great-grandchildren of survivors, that in some ways the most important in their lives happened before they were born. And it influences so much of their lives. And for us to think about the Armenian genocide as something that happened around World War I, if we remember where World War I was historically, which, as one of my friends who used to teach in middle school said, that was 1970, wasn't it? Or that the Holocaust happened, that these things continue to resonate through the lives of the generations. And that hopefully by having a panel to share with you that it's beyond just the lives of the survivors that we've had the great honor of meeting this semester. that we understand that this legacy continues to reverberate. And I'd now like to open it up to your questions. We have still, luckily, a little bit of time. Myrna.
Christine, what is your grandmother's name?
Maritza. Or her whole name? Okay, she was Maritza Uzunyan Jamgochan Davidian.
Cool.
Right.
That's very sweet.
Yeah. And your aunt, who is still alive.
Okay, my aunt is, well, we have an issue there. Her name was Ojen, but she insists at around age 90 she was Ejen. And so she was also, she was a Jamgochan Plantation. Right.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions? Comments? Come alive, Bahani. And then we are going to turn it to the students. You come first.
Where does forgiveness play a role in something as devastating as the Holocaust or genocide?
What a great question. You know, I have to take a breath before I answer the question. So the Buddha's teaching on that from the Dalai Lama is, if you don't forgive the other person, who are you hurting? Right. That's the answer to that question. You hurt yourself. So it would be to my best interest, all the people I'm still angry at. It would be my best interest. I work on it, really I do. But every now and then, you know, that little thing comes up because it's been there for such a long time, that particular continuous wound. I got to hear these stories over and over again from different people, different ways, to the point where after Schindler's List, I couldn't watch another Holocaust movie. I just had seen them, man. I said, this is for people who don't know this story. I live this story, you know? But forgiveness is available. There's a book called Radical Forgiveness where you just forgive. I was just in South Africa for 3 weeks. Nelson Mandela is a true saint. At the end of all the horrors the blacks went through, and the coloreds, there's two distinctions, there's blacks and coloreds in South Africa. Coloreds are more Asian, Muslim. That they went through, Nelson Mandela stood up and said, if you kill or exile all the whites, which you might want to do after all these years, you're going to have no country. What we need to do is have a council of reconciliation. People need to come forward and tell what they did, the monstrosities they did, and then we forgive them. And then we move on with it. That's the only country in Africa that tried that. And it's the only country, it's the most vibrant country in Africa, where whites and blacks actually work together in a very beautiful way. So forgiveness is necessary and possible.
Except, well, he doesn't
Yeah.
get to be the only one to answer that one.
No.
Forgive me, Rabbi.
Sarah.
I think, you know, for me, I was actually thinking of a sports metaphor on this today because I figured this question might come up. But, you know, so you're playing soccer, some guy, you know, trips you. It's a dirty trip. You know, then you could stop the game and turn and forgive, or you could be motivated to play a little harder and beat that team or whatever. So I think here I have so much time, I have so much energy. I spend a little piece of it talking about the Holocaust. I could spend time reaching out to Germans and trying to forgive a second-generation son of a Nazi Holocaust traitor, or I could reach out to the sons and daughters of Armenian genocide folks or the Cambodian genocide and say, what can we do together to try to spread the word about you know, humanity and how to fight these kinds of things in the future. And to me, being motivated by some of what happened in the past to work with others to improve things is probably where I would spend more of that time.
Good.
Well, this is a tough one for me because there's been no recognition. And forgiveness is a tough thing. And I know it's really hard. I just get very angry. So I'm not even at that point.
Yeah. And I think what you're referring to is the fact that the Turkish government has never formally acknowledged its role in the Armenian genocide.
Or the United States, or some other major countries around the world.
Yeah. Right. That's a hard one. Are there any student questions? Am I missing?
There are no dumb questions.
Oh, come
Yeah.
on,
Comments?
come on.
What any vivid experiences you may have had with anti-Semitism?
You know, I haven't had that many. I've had, one time I was on a radio in Colorado, and some Nazi guy came on. I was new to this town, Fort Collins, and this sort of skinhead character got on. It was a talk show, and he started ranting, and the guy cut him off. And I got very nervous. I was nervous because I had put my phone, you know, my name in the phone book, and I said, gee, I should get my name, change my phone number. But I thought about it. I said, you know, let's see what happens. But I've actually been, you know, I've had little angels floating around me most of my life. Thank you.
Response to Obama's recent visit to Turkey and his promise to officially recognize the Armenian genocide, at least during his election campaign.
Did everybody hear the question?
What are the feelings of the Armenian community regarding Obama's recent visit to Turkey and his promise during his election campaign to officially recognize the genocide?
Did you hear it up there, Denny? Great.
Yeah, great question. You're on top of things. That's awesome. That's great. The Armenian community is very nervous. We understand that he went there with really diplomatic way of, you know, being and everything. But apparently the Armenian community was the first community to endorse Obama because of his stance on the Armenian genocide. So we really believed in what he was doing. There's been a lot of stuff happening where we need to start sending him letters because we don't think it's going to happen. So there's just, you know, I get a lot of emails coming to me saying, get letters out because we just think it's going to happen yet again.
Is in here? There's a hand I saw? Yeah.
I just wanted to vocalize that these personal experiences definitely do enhance the education that I've received on these topics. So just an official, yes, those stick in my mind personally and enhance it.
Thank you. I think we have, yes, time for one more.
I wanted to ask what you guys think about, like in Darfur and all the atrocities that are going on there and genocides there too. Help in a way. I mean, is it just going to be like another Holocaust where years go by and people are still displaced and killed and mutilated? What you guys think about it as individuals, what we can do or say to help, or I mean, to try to spread things that I know to people too that don't know about it.
We heard about a 4-year-old yesterday who just sent a lot of backpacks to Darfur for kids there to make their life a little more comfortable and put some things in those backpacks. That was pretty cool. He's leading a 3-mile march through, which Congregation Shomrei Torah is helping organize in a couple, I'm not sure the date, but it's in a couple weeks.
June 6th, I believe.
But I think writing letters is a big deal too. It on Congresswoman Woolsey's radar screen at a higher level and Congressman Thompson and say, I want to know what you're doing. You know, what have you done to put resources to
Right.
stopping this, you know,
Right.
and that's part of it, and raising awareness with your friends, you know, it's when they're, if they're, you have to pick the right time, but you can raise awareness about it, and pressure people to make it.
I think that all the awareness that over the past several years that have come from places like even Sonoma State, letters and dollars and all kinds of efforts, I think has really helped to raise the awareness versus what it was when it was, you know, 15 years ago in Rwanda. I think it's a lot different. And even like the Armenian community always stands up and supports Darfur whenever there's something going on. The Armenian community is always there supporting them and helping them. So it can be better, there's no question.
Yeah. I want to add something real quick on that. I'm 43. When I was first learning about the Holocaust, and people in the Jewish community were saying, don't let it happen again, that is, you know, historically right when the Cambodian genocide was happening, 76 through 79. And looking back, I'd say, you know, people were in this kind of tunnel vision, and I think a lot of the communities now are not in that same kind of tunnel vision, and that's part of what gives me some hope that we'll try to do more.
Okay. Can I just say one last
Sure.
thing? So that's such a great question, you know? It comes from a great place. The question itself is almost, when you start questioning, and if you do it not solo and start questioning with others, that's an answer, because ideas will emerge from that. And there's a wonderful phrase from the Talmud, from an old Jewish interpretory source from around 2,000 years ago. It's just 2 words. It says, Hamevin Yavin. The one who knows will know what to do. So by putting it out and by facing it, and like this boy here, by putting it out and talking to people and facing it, you create ripples. And if you're not the one who's going to make the change, you've at least initiated it. You've started the ripples. And maybe down the road it'll be Obama who does the biggest thing. But what happened when I was involved in the rescue of Ethiopian Jewry was there were a lot of civilians, not a lot, there were a tiny number of civilians who cared about this group of people that nobody ever heard of. And what they started doing was talking about it. And guess what happened? When they talked about it, people would clap very politely and nothing would happen. At a certain point, they became a pain in the ass. They started embarrassing the Israeli government, they started embarrassing the US government by just showing that they actually could rescue people as just dumb civilians. And every time we rescued like 3 people, Israel would then rescue 100. And every time we would say, they would say, you can't rescue anybody, we sent the names of the people we rescued to the newspaper. And then in 1986, 12,000 people were airlifted out of Sudan. And then in 1991, 25,000 people were airlifted in 1 day. Largest airlift in history. 1 day out of, I guess also Sudan. I don't remember now where they were from. But all right. But we got out like 37,000 people, and we weren't always polite. We didn't do like really weird. We weren't terrorists. You know, I didn't blow anybody up. But I was annoying, as you probably can see I can be. So I recommend you do civil disobedience if it's necessary, and be polite if it helps.
And I also suggest that all of you have this conversation in sections. I would just like to thank our panelists and invite you to get information about the work of the Alliance, and also invite you to take the opportunity to walk to the Holocaust and Genocide Memorial Grove and have a sense of the way in which the survivor communities have been coming together. And I'm hoping that in the not too future, a videotape of the dedication ceremony will be there, because I think what came out at last night's Yom HaShoah event was the fact that all of the survivor communities were supporting one another, and we're seeing parallels in our experience. And I hope today you had a sense of that, not just shared pain, but shared dedication and commitment. It's no surprise that the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of survivors end up in some kind of helping profession, end up in doing work in their communities.
Right.
And we encourage you to continue that tradition. Thank you so much.